What's up, YouTube? Today I want to discuss a really cool technique for creating immersive granular pads with Bitwig's sampler. So this coincides with Bitwig's celebration for their 10-year anniversary, in which they've decided to do a bit of a giveaway. So they'll be giving away 3 copies of Bitwig, one for the full Bitwig Studio, one for Bitwig Producers Edition, and one for Bitwig Essentials Edition. So for more details, I'll be doing the giveaway in my Discord channel. You can check out all the links in the description. They'll also be doing a special promo sale with, I think, 50% off all their products for the next couple of days. I haven't been sponsored to say this. I just know that I do a lot of Bitwig content, and if you've been considering getting into Bitwig, it's probably a good time considering the sale. Anyway, like I said, I haven't been paid or sponsored to say that. I'm just a super fan of Bitwig. Anyway, let's dive in and look at this granular technique using Bitwig's sampler. So there's generally 2 ways that I kind of program these type of patches. So it's important to be kind of mindful of the result that you want before diving into it. If you want a more atmospheric kind of choppy, glitchy loop kind of thing, then don't worry too much about what I'm going to discuss for the next couple of minutes. If you want a more expressive pad where you can change keys and do all sorts of stuff like that, then it's important to actually dive into any material that you have in the project and remove some of the harmonic content. So I'm going to discuss that in the next couple of minutes. Like I said, depending on the outcome that you want, it might alter how you work with these particular sounds. So in this project, I've got a couple of layers here. These are all doing this sort of MIDI riff that I've created with quite a lot going on here. It's a piano and a couple of other kind of like physical modeling type layers over here. So I just want to zoom into this piano sound real quick, and I want to discuss what I'm talking about. So we could either just bounce this out as an audio sample and just use the granular system to chop up bits of that audio sample and play different chords. The problem with doing this is that if we change the note while we're retriggering that granular system that we're going to create, it's going to change the harmonic balance because there's a lot of chords and a lot of melodies happening in here. So say, for example, this chord that we have here is a C minor chord, and if we bounce this whole chord out and load it into a granular and then play a G, it's going to be playing a G minor chord, which is no longer... Okay, bad example because G minor is relevant to C minor, but it may no longer be relevant to that particular scale from the original thing. Does that make sense? Let's call this piano, lots of harmonics. And then what we can do here is we can jump in and we can edit this to only have different octaves. So we can actually mute any note that's not an exact octave from the root. And perhaps leave in a fifth every now and then, so that would be the G. So I'm going to remove anything that's kind of like too harmonic. And we can actually edit this a little bit because we may not want like any gaps in the audio. So like, let's say, for example, move all of these notes here because we're going to be retriggering it and doing all these kinds of things. The rhythm doesn't really matter so much right now. So this way, what we're doing is we're basically just creating a bunch of these kind of like octaves just to create variations, right? So then here, what we can do is we can bounce this out and we can call this piano octaves. So now what I want to do is I want to use that exact same theory with these other layers that we have here. Okay, so what I want to do here is let's just copy this MIDI onto these channels. And let's bounce these out. And so for the last layer, what we can do is we can actually just add some reverb to the piano. This is actually a pretty cool plugin called Air Windows Consolidated, which is, for those who don't know, Air Windows is a developer who releases a ton of free plugins. Seriously, like a ton of them. And here you can actually, it's like all of them in a single plugin. So some people may not like the fact that there's no actual interfaces on the plugins, but it allows you to actually dive in and actually listen to what they're doing. Do you know what I mean? Regardless, there's some pretty good reverbs in here and it's free, so you may as well. So I'm just going to put the reverb on that piano sound and we're going to bounce this as well. Okay, so what we have here now is we have 4 layers of those octaved variations. Okay, so now is when we start working on the actual granular sound. If you have a bunch of samples that you just want to load in, you can do that as well, but I like to keep things kind of harmonically relevant to the content that I'm making. So for example, I'll often use stuff from the track in the project so that it all kind of sounds like it's part of the same thing. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, let's start setting up the sampler. Let's just drag in the reverb piano sound and drop it like this. And what we want to do is we want to set this mode over to textures mode. So what that's going to do is instead of just playing the sample through, it's going to repeat very small segments. So what we want to do is we want to use this freeze. And then this becomes like which part it stops and repeats on. So what we want to do is we want to set this to the root note, which we were playing. So I think this was in F. And now we want to transpose the input so that it's, again, relevant to whatever we were doing. The grain is the size of this chunk that is being re-triggered. So with these kinds of things, I like larger grains because it gives you a more kind of washy sound. And motion basically shuffles the playback a little bit forward and backwards. So notice now we can actually change the pitch and it kind of all still sounds harmonically relevant because we were just using those octaves. Fantastic. Okay, so here what we want to do is we want to set up a random, which is going to scrub through this position over here. So we can apply random, we can set this to smooth, and we can apply it to the position. You see when we play multiple keys, this you see there that playback visual is like at different parts, and that's because this random is actually polyphonic. You can apply that here, or you can turn it on and off if you want, but for granular sounds, this is pretty essential to be polyphonic so that each voice has its own grain, essentially. Okay, so what we want to do here is we want to expand this idea into those 4 layers and create a system which allows us to kind of like morph between those layers. And we can do that using Bitwig's XY instrument. So what this is this is basically a container, and it allows you to kind of XY sweep between 4 different VST plugins. This is a really cool way of creating like layered synths and lead lines. But for these granular things, this is such a cool technique. What you want to do is you basically just want to put in one of these granular samplers into each of these little containers. So A has the piano reverbed, B will have the kind of more piano octaved sound. So let's just drag this in. Let's just adjust these settings to what it's supposed to be, the root note, etc. And let's drag this to the C, where we can put this zebralet physical modeled sound over here. Tune the root note. And over here with the last layer, tune the root note. Okay, so now what we can do is this basically now will trigger all 4 of those samplers when it's here in the middle, right? So the reason that I chose those specific layers, in fact, was because we have kind of more tonal ambient layers, we have more textural layers and percussive layers, and just that combination is like, you know, quite a full sound. You know what I mean? You've got the texture, you've got the harmonics and tone. So like I said, again, like going back to what I was saying in the beginning, it's important to be mindful of like the outcome, because that's going to change how you might pick your samples and set this whole thing up. So here with these kind of more textural percussive layers, I generally like to have smaller grains because they become more kind of textural as opposed to percussive-y. Okay, so the real magic comes in modulating these with modulators. So, for example, we could set up randoms, and these are going to basically sweep these randomly. So we could have one that does the X, and then we could set up another random to do the Y. That way it's going to automatically sweep. You see that? It's going to automatically create these kind of sweeps, soundscapes for us. Smooth this one out as well. We actually want to set these to bipolar, so they sweep up and down. Folks, that's without any reverb. Obviously, the process sounds had some reverb on them, but like, it's just got that huge immersive sound, and it's straight out of the patch. So we have pure control over the envelopes and everything like that. Such a cool technique, this. And we can expand this. You know, you're not limited to just XY instruments. We could, for example, use a post FX over here, put in an XY FX, where you have different effects that get modulated like this. We can take this idea of modulating an XY thing like this and apply it to just like traditional modulation. So a thing that I want to set up over here is, let's just put in a chain. In the chain, let's put in a tool, and I want to use Valhalla Supermassive over here. What we can do is we can set one of these reverb presets, large 80s space, and turn the mix to full. In fact, what we actually want to do is, on this chain, let's set up an XY over here, right? We can set the XY to X pan. No, we do want to do 200%. And then the Y can be Valhalla mix. And so this way we create a kind of like panning, a spatial panning system, which as it goes further back in the mix, it mixes in that reverb. And as we pull further forward, the reverb comes out. Okay, so let's set up randoms to control these modulations, and then we can set up a macro that's going to just modulate these random amounts up. Okay, so then here we can just call this like immersion, the immersion macro. And then on the main effects, we can actually just kind of like mirror that, you know, create a macro to control that macro, immersion. So here we can kind of control the amount of randoms in that panning. And then here we can also create one to create the amount of randoms here by also modulating this amount. Let's call this movement. We can actually move these here so that the main macros are right at the top here. I'm going to upload this preset to my Patreon for all my $5 supporters, just so that you don't have to go ahead and recreate this whole thing. You can just load this up, drop some samples in, and you're ready to go. Okay, so let's say you don't really want to create like an expressive pad sound. You just want to chuck a couple of loops in there and create like a Atmos-y, glitchy thing. I got you. So these are those same sounds, but before I started editing all that harmonic material out. So it's essentially just like loops of melodies and chords and that kind of thing. And we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to drag these into the sampler over here. So let's start off with the reverbed piano, set the root note, the regular piano, we can set the root note, plucky thing 1, we can set the root note, and plucky thing 2. Okay, so remember, like I said, You can't really play too many notes with this because there's going to be quite a bit of kind of clashing because there was already a lot of harmonic content in the sample. So stick to just the root note and octaves of the root note. Awesome. That's about it for today. Remember the giveaway that we'll be doing. The links and details will be in the description. Thank you to Bitwig for making it happen. And yeah, thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.